Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. This is video number 12 in our video series regarding the ethical use of AI in research. In today's video, we're going to see how we can perform the Z test using the Microsoft Excel and at the same time using maybe the ChatGPT and maybe some other listing. So basically, one of the disadvantage of this SPSS is that it doesn't have a kind of the analyze menu. You will not see any option that will give you a chance to carry out the Z test. So it only got the means, the one sample t-test, the independent sample t-test, and the rest together with the ANOVA. For you to perform the Z test using the SPSS, then you have to use the syntax. That means you write the code and you feed the SPSS with the code, then it will run the analysis for you. And this is actually tasking, and it's not an easy one unless if you have a kind of good background on programming and the rest. So when it comes to the Microsoft Excel, similarly, it got an option for the this thing. If you come to the data analysis tool pack, you will see it got the uh, Z test, but only it is for two samples. That is for you to use it. So that means you have to have two independent score. Let's say this is score one, then there should also be a score score two. So that is it will perform the Z test for you, but for two independent samples. But however, there is a way to bypass that. How to do it? You create a kind of dummy score. You just create a what dummy score. So you now place a what 0 here. So that will give you a chance of performing the Z score. So let's assume this is a score for a particular school in a given examination, which is, let's say, it's a kind of a national examination, and this is the scores of a particular school. And from the national performance, so the mean of the population is 65 and the standard deviation is 10. So what we want to do here, we want to compare the scores, the average scores of these particular students with the national or the population mean. So and the choice of the Z test, it is because the standard deviation of the population is known. We are giving 10 as the standard deviation of the what? The population. And also if you look at the sample size is almost more than 30. So that also gives a room for what? For the Z test. Since we know the standard deviation of the population, then definitely the t-test is not a better option for this. So we have to use the Z test. So now I will go to the data analysis, then locate where the Z test is, which is the last item on that particular drop down. So you now click on OK. Here I will select my scores, the actual score of the class of that particular student. Then for the second variable here, because I don't have any independent variable, but I have created a dummy. So I will just select this dummy. I will now click on what? On OK. So here it is the population mean that you're going to insert. If you look at the population mean, here we got 65. So you now insert the what? The 65. Here you got a standard deviation of 10. So it means if you want to convert that to a what? To a variance, so you have to find the square of it. So if you square 10, you will now get the what? The 100. Then for the second variable, since it is a dummy, so you have to write a value that is very negligible. Very negligible. So let's place this. So here you have to choose where you want the output to be. So we choose here, then we will now click on it, on OK. So now this will be the output. So it now remains for you to do the uh, uh, comparison. Then you now decide whether to accept your null or alternative hypothesis. But your null hypothesis always assumes no difference, no effect, and no relationship. So you will now say that the average score of this school, of this particular school, is the same with that of the national average. So that means the average of this should be equals to what? 65. But in formulating your alternative hypothesis, that is why you will going to have the test to be either one tail or what, or two tail. If in my alternative hypothesis I decided to say that the average score of this is not equals to the population mean. So what that means is that the average score of this could either be less than, or it can be what, greater than the national or the population mean. So in this particular case, I'm taking two direction, greater than or less than. So I'm going to use the two tail. But in a situation whereby in my null hypothesis I said the average score of this equals to this, then in formulating the null hypothesis I now says that the average score of this particular group of students is greater than 65. So you see here I'm taking only one direction in my alternative because I said this is greater, so it has to be greater. So in this particular case, it is going to be one tail. Then similarly, if I now says that the average score of this particular class is less than 65, so I'm also taking a direction that it has to be less than for me to accept the alternative. So it's also what, one tail. So this is very important as because the type of the whether it is one tail or two tail determines the critical Z values that you're going to compare with the calculated Z value before you accept or you reject. So here we have a calculated Z value of minus 1.03008, and for the two tail we have a critical value of 1.95 this. So what this means is that this value ranges from minus 1.95 to what? To positive, then to positive, where is the positive? To positive 1.95. So what I will now do is I will try to see does this minus 1.0300 falls within this range? If it does, then I will now go with my null hypothesis that there is no difference between what? Between those particular this thing, between the score of this particular student and the national average. While if this value does not fit into this range, then I will now reject the null hypothesis and go with the alternative. So if you insert this minus 1.03 into this range, it definitely falls within. So in this particular case, you will fail to reject your null hypothesis. You will go with the null hypothesis that the average score of this is the same with this. So similarly, if I'm using the one tail, so I'm just going to check the Z value of the one tail, which is what, which is this 1.6448. So I will now try to see whether this value is less than this. Yes, of course, this is minus 1.0, this thing, and it's less than 1.644. So therefore, I will also go with my null hypothesis that says that this and this are what, are the same. So if you don't want to use the Z score, you can use the p value. You remember the significance, this thing is 0.05 at 95% confidence level. So you now compare the individual p value for the one tail and the what, and the two tail to see whether you accept or you reject. So if you are using the one tail, it has a p value of 0.15. So that means you compare it with 0.05. So this also means that you are going to what, accept the null hypothesis because this is greater than the 0.05. Similarly, if you are using the p value for the two tail, you compare the 0.3029 with that of the 0.05. So this is greater than 0.05. You're going to accept the what? The null hypothesis. The most important point is this. You have to understand which of the tests are you using. Is it two tail or one tail? And also that depends on your what? Your alternative hypothesis. Okay, let us now use the SPSS, sorry, the ChatGPT and maybe the DeepSeek to help us do this and conclude so as to uh, minimize the type 1 and the type 2 error. So the type 1 error is normally when you reject the null hypothesis, when you are supposed to accept it, and it has this thing. Then the type 2 error is when you are supposed to accept the null hypothesis, then you now what? Reject the when you are supposed to reject the null hypothesis, you now what? Accept it. And in trying to avoid one of the error, you normally runs into the second error. So let's see whether the ChatGPT and this can help us do this and maybe conclude. So we can now compare this with what we obtained. But remember, you must have this basic knowledge before you can be able to trust the output of all this, either the SPSS and whatsoever. You must have the basic knowledge actually. So let me just say this perform. Let's say perform the let's say Z test for this course. Let's say the population mean 65 and the population standard deviation is what is 10. So I can say do both one tail and let's say two tail, then conclude. You remember in the Microsoft this thing, we we discussed for the one tail and the two tail. So also want this to do that. So I will paste these values that I have copied. Didn't I copy anything? Let me see. Okay. What have I done? So let me highlight these values. Then I will copy them. Then I will paste these values here. So what I will do, I will highlight this and maybe take it to the DeepSeek to see whether it can also do this one. So I will, yeah, I will also, so let's wait and see what will be the output from this AI. So the ChatGPT has already finished this. It has given the uh, one tail p value and the two tail p value. So it got the one tail p value as 0.84, which is greater than 0.05. So it means that you're going to accept the null hypothesis. Here also it got the two tail p value as 0.303, which is greater than 0.05. So you're also going to accept the null hypothesis. So you see it has concluded for you that you will fail to reject the null hypothesis, whereby you need to what? Go with the this thing. And also for the other one, the same thing, fail to reject the null hypothesis. But let's check whether these p values are the same with what we obtained. For the two tail we have 0.30. So here for the T tail, yeah, we have 0.303. If you approximate that, yeah, it's correct. Then the p value for the one tail we got 0.15 this thing, but here we got 0.89. But anyway, the conclusion remain the same. So let's check what this the DeepSeek has done. So you see, the DeepSeek has done that more elaborately than than the what than the ChatGPT, because it has also given you uh, the Z score, and it also interprets that for you. For the first one, that is it gives the result for the p-value, and at the same time the critical z, and then the calculated z. So it now compares the two and it rejects the null hypothesis. So as you can see, it got a z value of 1.72 for the two tail, and for the one tail this, then it compares this with this and this for this. So actually what we got as our z value using here is minus 1.0300. So it's not the same, but the conclusion remains the same. So fail to reject the null hypothesis. So I think that is it. So the most important thing is you need to understand the basic, because these AI tools can sometimes give you a kind of wrong output. So it depends on your know-how, that is your knowledge, to be able to know which one to take, what to take, and what to discard. So assalamu alaikum.